"Order in the court!" The gavel cracked, but the laughter that followed cut deeper than the sound. Judge Harold Kent leaned back in his chair, smirking, his voice dripping with ridicule. "There's no use crying, you pathetic black woman." Across the courtroom, Ariana Cole stood frozen, one hand gripping the edge of the plaintiff's table, the other clutching her phone like a lifeline. The tears in her eyes weren't weakness, they were calculation. She blinked once, steadying herself, her voice barely audible. "Noted, Your Honor." The gallery chuckled. He laughed louder. He thought he'd broken her. But Ariana wasn't breaking. She was remembering. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Ariana Cole. The courtroom of Fulton County glowed with a sterile, indifferent light. 12 people sat in the gallery, jurors off duty, reporters hoping for scandal, and strangers drawn by the spectacle of power gone unchecked. Ariana's gray suit wasn't expensive enough to intimidate them, not bright enough to earn respect. That was deliberate. She wanted the judge to underestimate her, to reveal himself in public record. On the stand, the opposing counsel, Richard Lowe, leaned over his stack of papers. "So, Miss Cole, you claim the contract was stolen?" His tone mocked. "You sure you didn't just misunderstand the terms?" Ariana raised her eyes, calm. "I don't misunderstand what I billed," he smirked. "Then explain why your name's missing from the patent filing." She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because at that moment, in the back of the courtroom, a man in a tailored Navy suit entered quietly, her attorney. Yes, but not just any attorney. The crowd hadn't noticed him yet, but she had. Her voice softened, steady as a loaded weapon. "Because, counselor, the document you're holding isn't real." The judge scoffed. "Now, Miss Cole, don't start playing the victim card in my courtroom." The word times, victim times, stung, not because it was true, but because it was meant to cage her. Ariana glanced down, tapped her phone twice under the table. Her assistant's voice came faintly through her earpiece. "Ma'am, the files are verified." And they're walking in. Her heartbeat slowed. The courtroom doors creaked open again. Camera shutters clicked once, faint but unmistakable. Judge Kent shifted, sensing the change in air pressure, the tension rising like heat before a storm. Ariana looked up, her tone still polite. "Your Honor, I believe you'll want to remain standing for this next witness." The laughter stopped. The reporters looked around. The judge frowned, suddenly unsure. Ariana's tears had dried, her spine straightened, and her eyes no longer pleaded, they warned. In less than a minute, the room that mocked her would remember her name, not as a plaintiff, but as the woman who owned the very corporation everyone in that courtroom depended on for their paychecks. The courtroom had never felt heavier. The air itself seemed to pulse with tension as Ariana Cole stood at the plaintiff's table, her fingers resting lightly on the cool wood surface, her expression unreadable. The same judge who had mocked her moments ago now sat uncomfortably upright, sensing the shift he could not explain. The murmurs from the gallery had turned into a low buzz of disbelief. Everyone could feel that something was about to break, they just did not know what. The door creaked open again, slow and deliberate. Every head turned. A tall figure in a charcoal suit stepped inside, his stride calm but commanding. He carried no briefcase, no visible badge of authority, yet the court clerk stood up instantly. Ariana's eyes flicked toward him, just once, enough for anyone paying attention to know he was not just a bystander. "Mr. Grant," she said softly. "Thank you for joining us." The judge's eyes narrowed. "And who exactly are you?" he asked, his tone still dripping with the arrogance of someone who had never been challenged. "Mr. Grant smiled faintly, walking forward. "I represent the board of Horizon Holdings," he said, "and I am here under court authorization to submit evidence pertaining to this case." The opposing counsel froze. The name Horizon Holdings carried weight more than the courtroom could hold. "Wait," the judge stammered. "Horizon? The corporate conglomerate? The same?" Mr. Grant replied smoothly. "We have an interest in this proceeding. Miss Cole is one of our majority stakeholders." The silence that followed was absolute. Reporters leaned forward, pens suspended midair. The judge's smirk disappeared as color drained from his face. Ariana did not gloat. She simply looked at him and said, "You called me a fraud in a courtroom partially funded by my own foundation." The words landed like a gavel strike. The courtroom gasped. The bailiff shifted awkwardly, unsure where to look. Mr. Grant placed a sealed folder on the table before the clerk. "Inside is documentation confirming Miss Cole's financial ownership stake in Horizon's legal subsidiaries, including Horizon Civic Development, the same organization that donated to this courthouse's renovation. The judge blinked rapidly. That cannot be. It is, Ariana interrupted quietly, her tone firm but even. You laughed at me for crying, Your Honor, but those tears were not for me. They were for what this system still does to people who look like me. The courtroom camera lights flickered as reporters whispered to each other. The judge adjusted his robe as if it suddenly weighed too much. You are saying this entire hearing was built on bias, Ariana finished for him, her eyes locked with his. And I am not the one on trial anymore. A young court officer sitting near the gallery looked shaken. He whispered to a colleague, She's the CEO of that Horizon? The man beside him nodded slowly, stunned. Across the room, the opposing attorney tried to speak, but no sound came out. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up a paper that no longer mattered. Ariana's phone buzzed once. A single message glowed on the screen. Asterisk. All systems verified. Statement ready. Asterisk. She turned the screen face down, her calm returning. The judge finally found his voice again, but it was smaller now, quieter. Miss Cole, I was not aware of your... That is the problem, she said gently but firmly. You were aware enough to judge me by appearance, but not enough to question your assumptions. She turned her attention to the gallery where the witnesses sat. Some nodded quietly, others wiped at tears they did not expect to shed. Ariana looked around, taking in the entire room, the marble pillars, the flags, the polished wood benches, all symbols of justice that had failed to live up to their promise. This courtroom was supposed to represent fairness, she said softly. But fairness cannot exist where bias decides who is credible and who is not. The judge shifted again, but said nothing. Mr. Grant leaned forward slightly. Your Honor, the Board of Horizon Holdings requests an immediate recess to enter our filings and evidence into the record. The judge nodded slowly, still pale. Granted, he managed to say. As the gavel fell, the sound echoed differently this time, not as authority, but as surrender. Ariana gathered her files, straightened her jacket, and glanced at the judge one last time. Justice, she said, her voice calm as glass, is not a privilege. It is an obligation. Then she turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving the judge frozen, the reporters scrambling, and every camera in the room capturing the moment the narrative shifted forever. The courthouse corridor fell silent as Ariana Cole stepped through its tall glass doors, her heels clicking against the marble floor like distant gunshots. Reporters swarmed but hesitated, uncertain whether to shout questions or simply record history in real time. The same woman they had just seen humiliated in open court now walked as though she owned the building because, in a way, she did. Mr. Grant followed half a step behind, speaking quietly into his earpiece. Security detail is in place. The board is streaming this live, he said. Ariana gave a faint nod. Good. Let them watch how justice corrects itself. Behind her, the courtroom doors remained open, revealing the judge still seated, still stunned, watching the very defendant he had mocked transform into his benefactor. A court clerk approached, hands trembling slightly. Miss Cole, she said softly, I just wanted to say, I am sorry for how you were treated. Ariana paused, looked at the young woman, and replied evenly, Apologies do not fix systems, but they start conversations. Keep that courage when no one is filming. The clerk nodded, eyes wet. Then Ariana turned to face the row of cameras lined along the hallway. One reporter finally found her voice. Miss Cole, can you comment on what just happened inside? Ariana stopped walking, composed herself, and faced the crowd. What happened, she began, her voice calm and steady, was not just an insult to me. It was a reflection of how far we still have to go. Today's courtroom reminded me that titles do not stop bias, only accountability does. Another reporter called out, Are you pressing charges against the judge? Ariana smiled faintly. I do not need revenge. I have influence, and influence used right can reform more than punishment ever will. Cameras flashed, questions overlapped. Miss Cole, did you plan this confrontation? She met that question head-on. I did not plan to be disrespected, but I am never surprised when I am. What I plan is what comes after. She glanced toward Mr. Grant, who handed her a small folder marked with the Horizon Holdings seal. Within the hour, she said, my foundation will submit a petition for judicial bias review to the State Commission. We are not here to shame a man. We are here to rebuild a system. Her words spread through the crowd like static electricity. Reporters exchanged glances. One whispered, She's turning the trial into a reform hearing. Ariana continued walking toward the exit, the courthouse security clearing her path, but her tone softened as she spoke again, this time to no one in particular. When I was 23, I sat in a courtroom just like this as an intern, watching another woman cry while a man in robes told her to be grateful she was heard. I promised myself that day I would never just be heard, I would be remembered. Outside, the wind caught the hem of her gray blazer as the courthouse steps came into view. Dozens of people had gathered, some protesters, some supporters, all drawn by the unfolding story of a black CEO who had been mocked for showing emotion in a place that called itself fair. A young girl, no older than 12, held a sign that read, "Justice has no color." Ariana slowed her pace when she saw it. The girl's mother whispered, "She wanted to see you in person." Ariana crouched slightly so they were eye to eye. "Do not let the world tell you your tears are weakness," she said gently. "Sometimes they are warnings." The girl smiled shyly. Cameras clicked again, capturing the image that would appear on every news feed by nightfall. The CEO who had brought a courthouse to silence, kneeling to speak to a child about power. As Ariana rose, Mr. Grant leaned in. "Press is asking for a statement outside the courthouse." Ariana adjusted her jacket and said, "Then let us give them one worth quoting." She stepped up to the podium set near the base of the stairs, surrounded by microphones, her posture unshakable. "What happened today was not extraordinary," she said. "It was ordinary, ordinary bias, ordinary dismissal, ordinary injustice. But what happens next will not be, because we are done pretending this is acceptable. I am not here for applause. I am here for change." A wave of applause still came anyway, unplanned and uncontained. The crowd felt the shift. The same quiet power that had filled the courtroom now flowed through the open air. Ariana looked over them all, her final words deliberate. "They laughed at my tears," she said, "but tears can flood a system too long built to drown others. Remember that." She turned away as the cameras followed, stepping into the waiting black car. The doors closed softly, but the echo of her words remained spreading faster than the wind, carried by every recording, every retweet, and every person who had ever been told they did not belong. Rain had begun to fall by the time Ariana Cole's car pulled away from the courthouse. The city outside her tinted window blurred into streaks of gray and silver, like the world itself was washing away what had just happened. Inside the car, the silence was sharp. Mr. Grant sat across from her, tablet in hand, scrolling through the live coverage. "Every major outlet has it," he said quietly. "Kuhn, MSNBC, even the Journal. They are calling it the trial that turned itself inside out." Ariana looked out the window, her reflection calm but her eyes still burning. "They can call it whatever they want," she said. "Just make sure they spell my name right." Grant smirked slightly, but the humor faded fast. "The Judicial Commission already requested a transcript of the hearing. That judge will be facing review by morning." Ariana nodded. "Good. But we are not here to punish one man. We are here to expose how many others laughed just like him." The car turned into the private entrance of Horizon Holdings headquarters, a towering glass structure downtown, its facade reflecting the city lights like a mirror of power. Security guards snapped to attention as the vehicle stopped. As she stepped out, the rain eased. But the storm inside the building was just beginning. Her executive assistant, Nia Thompson, met her in the lobby with a tablet and a look of urgency. "Ma'am, we have incoming statements from 3 federal agencies asking if Horizon plans to issue a corporate position on judicial reform." Ariana walked toward the elevator, voice low but resolute. "We do not issue positions, we issue change." The elevator doors slid shut, sealing them in a quiet, humming ascent. Nia hesitated, glancing at her screen. "Social media is exploding, Ariana. Some people are calling you a hero. Others say you used your wealth to embarrass the court." Ariana didn't look up. "Let them say it. They have been comfortable watching people like me humiliated for free. Now they are just upset that the narrative flipped." The doors opened to the top floor, a glass-walled conference room overlooking the rain-soaked city. Inside, the senior board members of Horizon were already waiting. James Porter, head of legal, stood first. "Ariana," he said, his voice tight with admiration and concern, "what you did today was remarkable, but the fallout will be huge. The commission, the media, the political side of this, it will not be quiet." Ariana placed her umbrella aside and took her seat at the head of the table. "Neither will I," she said simply. She leaned forward, fingers interlocked. "We are launching an initiative, Horizon Equity Review. It starts with every department we fund, every institution we support. We will not be the company that donates to injustice. The boardroom fell silent. Sarah Klein, the communications director, spoke next, cautious but curious. You mean internal audits? Ariana's gaze sharpened. I mean accountability audits. From our contractors to our court partnerships. If a single organization connected to Horizon has a pattern of bias, they lose our funding, effective immediately. Mr. Grant nodded approvingly from the corner. That will set a precedent, Ariana replied. That is the point. Nia, still typing rapidly, looked up. Ma'am, the press wants to know if this decision was emotional or strategic. Ariana turned to her, her tone cold but clear. It was human. The room stilled again. Rain drummed softly against the glass, and the city lights below flickered like embers in a storm. Ariana rose slowly, her presence commanding even in stillness. We are not going to wait for fairness to arrive, she said. We are going to build it ourselves. James leaned back, nodding. Then this is history. Ariana gave a small, knowing smile. No, she said, walking toward the window. This is justice on schedule. Her reflection merged with the skyline, rain tracing lines down the glass like ink on a declaration. Outside, the thunder rolled. But inside Horizon Holdings, something far louder had begun the sound of a system being rewritten from the top down. By the following morning, the entire city was talking about Ariana Cole. Her face filled every television screen, every news feed, every conversation that dared to mention justice and race in the same breath. Headlines read, Black CEO turns courtroom into reform platform. From tears to power, the woman who changed the narrative. Yet inside Horizon Holdings, Ariana was already 3 steps ahead of the story. She stood at the massive glass wall of her office, sunlight cutting through the last remnants of rain clouds, her reflection overlapping the skyline. Behind her, the board members filed in again, weary but ready. The numbers are in, said Sarah Klein, sliding a report across the polished table. Public trust in Horizon Holdings has doubled overnight, but so have the threats. Political commentary, backlash, trolls, you name it. Ariana did not turn around. When systems break, those who benefited from them scream the loudest. Let them. James Porter, cautious as ever, added, We also received notice that Judge Kent has been placed under internal review. The commission cited misconduct and bias. They will make it public soon. Ariana finally turned, her tone measured. It was never about destroying a man's career. It was about proving that justice has blind spots. And when it cannot see, we must help it. Nia, who had been standing quietly by the door, spoke up. We have hundreds of messages from young lawyers and law students. They are asking how to get involved. Ariana's gaze softened slightly. Then we give them a path. She walked toward the long digital screen at the end of the room. Effective immediately, we will launch the Cole Initiative, an educational fellowship for minority law students focused on judicial accountability and ethics. Funded by Horizon, operated independently. The board exchanged surprised looks. Mr. Grant smiled faintly. You just turned a scandal into a movement, Ariana replied. It was never a scandal. It was exposure. Her words landed heavy in the air, deliberate and precise. Outside, the city pulsed with headlines and hashtags, but inside, she was already shaping what came next. Schedule a press conference, she said to Nia. But not in this building. I want it at the courthouse, the same steps where they laughed. Nia hesitated. Are you sure? That could be confrontational? Ariana's voice remained calm. Good. Let them see that confrontation can be constructive. Hours later, as she approached the courthouse once more, a different crowd awaited her. Not angry, not chaotic, curious, hopeful, mixed with disbelief that change could come this fast. Camera crews lined the sidewalks, but so did students holding small, handwritten signs. Accountability is not revenge, and justice needs witnesses. Ariana climbed the steps without a hint of hesitation. Mr. Grant handed her a microphone. The wind tugged gently at her hair as she began. Yesterday I cried in this building, she said, her voice carrying across the plaza. Today I return not with anger but with purpose. We cannot call this place a house of justice until every person who enters it is treated with dignity. Not courtesy. Dignity. The crowd fell silent, listening. The Cole Initiative begins today, she continued. It will mentor, fund, and protect those who seek fairness over fame, because fairness should never need to ask for permission. A young man in the front row, maybe 19, raised his voice nervously. Miss Cole, what gave you the strength to stand up to them? Ariana looked at him with quiet conviction. I did not stand up to them, she said. I stood up for us. The applause that followed was not loud, it was deep, steady, and human. As she stepped down from the podium, a reporter called out, "Miss Cole, do you think this will really change the system?" Ariana paused at the bottom of the steps. "No," she said honestly, "but it will make it harder for the system to stay the same." She walked toward her car as cameras kept rolling, but for once, she was not performing for them. She was recording something else, proof that dignity, once reclaimed, does not fade. It multiplies. The next week unfolded like a storm in slow motion. Every major news outlet dissected the courtroom incident, and every social media feed turned Ariana Cole's name into a symbol of fearless restraint. But while the world debated her motives, Ariana was focused on building infrastructure for the change she had promised. Her office at Horizon Holdings became a command center, alive with the quiet hum of coordinated reform. Reports from legal analysts, compliance officers, and civil rights advisors filled her desk, each one carrying evidence that systemic bias had roots deeper than anyone had admitted. Nia Thompson entered, carrying a stack of printouts. "Ma'am, the commission wants to meet with you privately," she said. "They are requesting your input for their upcoming judicial ethics review." Ariana took the papers, glancing through them without looking up. "Good," she replied. "It is time they heard from someone who does not speak their language but understands their silence." Behind her, Mr. Grant joined in. "There is also a call from the mayor's office. They want to give you an award for civic leadership." Ariana smiled slightly, though her eyes stayed cold. "You do not fix bias with trophies, Mr. Grant. You fix it with truth." He nodded. "Then we keep going." The following afternoon, Ariana arrived at the State Commission building, flanked by cameras and advisors. The same reporters who once doubted her now waited outside for her statement. Inside the meeting room, 8 officials sat at a long table, guarded by their own sense of hierarchy. The chairwoman, an older woman with gray hair and a practiced smile, gestured for Ariana to sit. "Miss Cole, we appreciate your cooperation," she began. "We are reviewing the conduct of Judge Harold Kent and wish to ensure a fair investigation." Ariana's reply was immediate. "Fairness is not what you ensure after exposure," she said. "It is what you practice before it becomes a headline." The chairwoman blinked, clearly unprepared for Ariana's composure. "We understand this is emotional for you," Ariana interrupted softly. "Emotion does not make me irrational. It makes me human. That is something your system often forgets when it sees faces like mine." The room went still. The commission's legal advisor cleared his throat. "Miss Cole, the footage from the hearing went viral. Would you be open to participating in a public forum on judicial accountability?" Ariana leaned forward. "I will participate on one condition: that the word accountability is not just printed on a banner but written into policy." The advisor hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed." As the meeting adjourned, Ariana gathered her documents, but before leaving, she turned back to the room. "One more thing," she said quietly. "I have been called strong, defiant, resilient, but I am not here to be admired. I am here to be replaced by a generation that will not need to prove they belong." No one responded. They just watched her leave. Outside, the afternoon sun cut through the clouds, scattering light across the courthouse steps where protesters now held signs that read "Justice for All" and the Cole Standard. Nia waited at the car with her tablet, eyes wide. "Ma'am, the board just approved the first $25 million for the Cole Initiative. Full funding." Ariana smiled faintly. "Good. Let us use every cent to make sure no one else has to cry in a courtroom to be heard." As the car pulled away, the city seemed quieter, more alert, as if it too understood that something irreversible had begun. Ariana looked out at the horizon, her reflection clear in the glass. The rain had ended days ago, but the world was still rinsing itself clean. She whispered, almost to herself, "Justice is not a storm. It is erosion. Slow, steady, and unstoppable." And somewhere in that quiet, her phone buzzed a notification from an unknown number. The message was simple, asterisk, "Thank you. I was in that courtroom too." Asterisk. Ariana stared at it for a long moment, then closed her eyes. The fight was working. By the time Friday arrived, Ariana Cole's world had shifted again. The courtroom where she was once humiliated had now become the symbol of a national reckoning. The Cole Initiative had gone viral, with law students, activists, and even corporate executives signing open letters of support. But not everyone was celebrating. Inside her office, the tone had changed. Nia entered holding a phone, her expression tight. "Ma'am, we received an anonymous message someone claims to have internal documents showing Horizon's funding was used to back a judicial candidate with a history of bias." Ariana's eyes narrowed. "Send it to my desk, now." Minutes later, she sat reading through a string of scanned contracts and donation records. The logos were unmistakable Horizon Holdings. But the signatures were old, long before her leadership. "They tried to bury this," she said under her breath. Mr. Grant entered, closing the door behind him. "It looks like a past board decision. You had no involvement." Ariana looked up slowly. "That does not matter. If we financed injustice, we own the correction." Her voice was even, but her eyes burned with controlled anger. She stood, walking to the massive window overlooking downtown. "Schedule a meeting with the remaining Legacy Board members tonight." Grant hesitated. "At night?" Ariana turned sharply. "At night is when systems hide their dirt. That is when I clean." Hours later, the boardroom lights glowed against the darkness of the city. The old guard was seated 3 men and 1 woman, all in their 60s, veterans of corporate politics. They looked uncomfortable, as if summoned by a force they had underestimated. Ariana entered last, her presence both quiet and commanding. "I appreciate your attendance," she began, her voice steady but sharp as glass. "It has come to my attention that under Horizon's previous administration, donations were made to political campaigns of judges known for discriminatory rulings. Those actions contradict everything we stand for." "Explain it." The oldest man, Walter Briggs, cleared his throat. "Miss Cole, those donations were standard practice. Every major corporation does it. It was strategic." Ariana leaned forward across the table, her tone like a blade. "Strategic bias is still bias. You bought influence that silenced fairness. You did not invest in justice. You sponsored oppression." Silence fell. Walter looked down. "It was never meant to be personal." Ariana straightened, her words cutting through the tension. "It always becomes personal when someone else pays the price." Nia, seated beside her, handed her a tablet. "We have compiled every donation, contract, and political contribution made under those names. If it connects to bias, it ends tonight." The woman on the board, Margaret Hale, spoke softly. "Ariana, dismantling this will draw blood. You will make enemies in places you cannot see." Ariana met her gaze. "I am not afraid of shadows, Margaret. They only exist when the light is strong." Mr. Grant leaned in from behind her. "Do you want me to issue the withdrawal orders?" Ariana nodded once. "Yes, effective immediately. Every cent, every partnership, every donation tied to prejudice is revoked." The sound of pens scratching and documents printing filled the silence. As the orders were signed, Ariana walked to the end of the table. "This company once tried to buy protection from accountability," she said. "Now it will buy integrity instead." She turned back toward the window, where lightning flashed faintly on the horizon. "Let them come for me. Let them write their editorials and twist their headlines. I am not afraid to lose what was built wrong." "Mr." Grant looked at her and said quietly, "You are rebuilding the law, not just leading a company." Ariana smiled faintly. "Then let history show that sometimes justice does not knock, it walks in." The meeting ended, but her words stayed, echoing in the glass tower long after midnight. The next morning, Horizon Holdings felt different. The air inside the glass tower was charged, as if the building itself understood that something irreversible had happened. Overnight, Ariana Cole's midnight meeting had already made its way into the news. "Black CEO dismantles her own company's political network," one headline read. Another said, "Ariana Cole declares war on corporate bias." But Ariana was not thinking about headlines. She was thinking about legacy. She stood alone in her office, coffee untouched, watching the city breathe beneath her. Nia entered quietly, a tablet in hand. "The withdrawal orders went through," she said. "All political accounts tied to biased judges have been frozen. You will get pushback." Ariana turned from the window, her tone calm but absolute. "Let them push. I built this company to move forward, not to bow." Mr. Grant joined them, holding a printed report. "There is one more issue," he said carefully. "The firm that handled those donations, Briggs & Lowe, was also the same law group representing the courthouse in your case." Ariana's jaw tightened. "So they were protecting themselves." She exhaled slowly, the anger beneath her composure sharp but controlled. "Prepare a statement. We are cutting all ties effective immediately." Grant nodded. "Already in motion." He hesitated before adding, "You realize this could cost Horizon millions in government contracts." Ariana gave him a steady look. "Integrity is not an expense. It is an investment. Let them measure profit in numbers. I measure it in consequence." Her words hung in the room like a verdict. Outside, cameras were gathering again. This time not at a courthouse, but at Horizon's entrance. Protesters stood alongside supporters, some holding signs that read "Accountability over Comfort" and "Coal for Change." Inside, the executive floor buzzed with restrained panic. Some saw her as a hero. Others whispered that she was dangerous. Ariana stepped into the boardroom where department heads had gathered for an emergency briefing. The tension was thick, but she didn't flinch. "I know why you are nervous," she began. "You think justice costs too much. You think silence is safer. But ask yourself this: what is the price of staying the same?" No one spoke. The youngest department head, a woman barely 30, raised her hand cautiously. "Miss Cole, what if our investors walk away?" Ariana looked directly at her. "Then we will walk taller, because the right investors are not afraid of the truth." The room was quiet, the kind of silence that comes before transformation. Nia stepped forward and handed Ariana a small folder. "This just came in," she said softly. Inside was a letter embossed with the seal of the Judicial Commission. Ariana unfolded it. "Dear Miss Cole," it read, "due to your public testimony and newly submitted evidence, Judge Harold Kent has been formally suspended pending investigation." Ariana's eyes scanned the words carefully, then closed the folder without a word. Mr. Grant smiled faintly. "That is one system down." Ariana shook her head. "No, that is one symptom treated. The system still breathes." She walked toward the large glass window overlooking the city again. "We are not done. Horizon will now fund an independent audit of judicial appointments statewide. If fairness is for sale, I want to know who is buying it." Sarah Klein, the communications director, looked stunned. "That will make enemies in both parties." Ariana turned to her unblinking. "Then it means we are doing something right." As she spoke, thunder rolled in the distance, the faint rumble echoing through the glass walls. Ariana's phone buzzed on the desk, hundreds of messages, interviews, and invitations. She ignored them all. Her eyes stayed fixed on the skyline. "Power does not corrupt," she whispered. "It reveals." Behind her, the city moved, unaware that the woman standing in that tower had just declared the next chapter of her revolution. And this time, no courtroom would be big enough to contain it. By Monday morning, the city was awake to a new kind of silence, the kind that comes right before a shift in history. The Judicial Commission's decision to suspend Judge Harold Kent had spread through every media outlet, but what no one expected was Ariana Cole's next move. She was already 3 steps ahead, sitting in a conference room surrounded by her core team, maps and documents spread out like a strategist preparing for a new campaign. "We will not stop at one courtroom," she said firmly. "We are expanding the Cole Initiative beyond this state. Every Horizon branch across the country will partner with law schools and justice organizations to identify systemic bias and report it in real time." Nia Thompson looked up from her laptop, wide-eyed. "Ma'am, that means dealing with government contracts, local courts, even corporate donors. They will not like it." Ariana's gaze did not waver. "They do not have to like it, they just have to face it." The room was quiet for a moment before James Porter, the legal director, leaned forward. "Ariana, you are turning Horizon Holdings into a reform machine. Are you sure this is the company's responsibility?" Ariana looked straight at him. "If we have benefited from the system, then we are responsible for cleaning it." Her voice was calm, but the conviction in it filled the room like a current of electricity. "Mr. Grant added softly, you are aware that several senators are already calling you dangerous?" Ariana gave a small smile. "Good. That means they are paying attention." Across town, in an ivy-covered lecture hall, a live stream of Ariana's press conference began playing for a group of law students. Her face appeared on the massive screen, eyes sharp, tone measured. "Justice does not require permission," she said, "and integrity should not be optional. If you ever find yourself in a position where you must choose between being respected and being right, choose right. Respect will follow." The students applauded, and one of them whispered, "She is changing the playbook." Back at Horizon headquarters, Ariana's phone buzzed. Nia handed it to her. "It is from the Department of Justice," she said quietly. Ariana opened the message. It was an invitation. They wanted her to testify before a congressional committee about corporate influence on the judicial system. For a brief second, she stared at the screen in silence. Then she looked up. "Book the flight." Nia blinked. "You are actually going?" "Yes," Ariana replied. "They gave me a seat at the table. They will regret it." That evening, as her private jet cut through the twilight sky toward Washington, D.C., Ariana sat by the window, city lights fading below. The hum of the engine matched the rhythm of her thoughts, measured, relentless, unstoppable. Mr. Grant sat across from her, reviewing briefing papers. "They will try to corner you," he warned. "They will frame this as overreach." Ariana looked up from her notes. "Then I will remind them that silence was the real overreach. They ignored what we lived, and now they will listen." She closed her folder, leaned back, and let the quiet stretch. Outside, the night sky was clear, a vast canvas of stars scattered over the horizon. "I used to believe power was given," she said softly. "Now I know it is reclaimed." Grant nodded slowly, realizing what everyone around her was beginning to understand. Ariana Cole was not fighting for justice anymore. She was redefining it. When the plane touched down on the DC runway, cameras were already waiting. As she stepped out, calm and steady, one reporter shouted, "Miss Cole, are you ready to face Congress?" Ariana paused just long enough to meet the camera's gaze and said, "Congress should be ready to face the truth." Then she walked forward, unflinching, into the heart of power she no longer feared. The marble halls of Capitol Hill echoed with the shuffle of cameras and the low murmur of reporters as Ariana Cole walked toward the congressional chamber. Her gray suit was immaculate, her stride deliberate, and her expression unreadable. Outside, hundreds had gathered, some holding signs that read, "The Cole Initiative equals real justice." Others whispered doubts about whether a corporate leader had any right to question Congress. But Ariana was not there to seek approval. She was there to deliver accountability. Inside the chamber, the air was thick with anticipation. Lawmakers lined the benches, each one armed with notes, statistics, and political intent. At the center sat the committee chair, Senator Howard Ames, a man known for his sharp tongue and disdain for corporate reformers. "Miss Cole," he began, his tone thinly veiled with skepticism, "thank you for coming. You have made quite a name for yourself in recent weeks, but this committee is not a stage for publicity. We are here to discuss facts." Ariana adjusted the microphone calmly. "Then let us start with facts, Senator. Horizon Holdings has voluntarily ended over 42 contracts with political groups that funded biased judicial campaigns. We have opened all our internal records for federal audit. Can this Congress say the same?" A ripple of surprise spread through the room. Ames frowned. "Miss Cole, this is not about Congress. It is always about Congress," she replied evenly. "You shape the laws that shape lives. You fund the systems that decide who gets justice and who gets judged." Her tone was steady, not confrontational, but her words landed like impact points in a debate no one else had dared to start. Another senator, a woman from Illinois, leaned forward. "Miss Cole, some critics say your actions are performative, that you are using activism to shield corporate mistakes." Ariana turned toward her. "If admitting fault and correcting it is performative, then maybe performance is what this country needs. Because silence has not saved anyone." The audience behind her murmured in agreement. The chair tapped his gavel. "Order, please." But order was already lost. What filled the room now was awakening. Ariana continued, her voice deepening with each sentence. "I am not here to accuse. I am here to remind. Justice is not something you deliver like a favor. It is something you protect like oxygen, because once it is gone, people start to suffocate." The room fell silent. Even the cameras seemed to hum quieter. Senator Ames cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "So what exactly are you proposing, Miss Cole?" Ariana looked directly at him, her gaze unflinching. "A bipartisan oversight committee for judicial funding, independent of political donations, full transparency in campaign contributions from corporate entities, and mandatory ethics audits for every sitting judge. I am not asking for permission, I am offering partnership." A few senators exchanged glances. The woman from Illinois nodded slightly. "You realize, Miss Cole, you are asking us to change how power operates." Ariana's lips curved into a small, confident smile. Power is supposed to serve people, not preserve itself. The hearing room erupted not in chaos, but in applause. Staffers, visitors, even some senators clapped before remembering where they were. Senator Ames stared at her, jaw tight. "You think you can shame us into reform?" Ariana leaned slightly toward the microphone. "I do not believe in shame, Senator. I believe in consequence." Cameras flashed, recording every word, every look. It was no longer a hearing, it was history. As she stood and gathered her papers, Ames called out, "Miss Cole, do you think this makes you untouchable?" She paused at the door and replied without turning around, "It does not make me untouchable. It makes me undeniable." The doors closed behind her, and the sound echoed like a verdict. Outside, the crowd roared. The revolution she had started in a courtroom had just stepped into Congress, and there was no going back. The night after the congressional hearing, Washington, D.C. did not sleep. The clip of Ariana Cole's final words, "It does not make me untouchable. It makes me undeniable," played on every news broadcast, every social platform, every phone screen across the country. But Ariana was already somewhere else, standing alone on the rooftop terrace of her D.C. office. The city lights stretched beneath her like constellations trapped in glass, and the cold air carried a strange peace she had not felt in weeks. Mr. Grant approached quietly, holding 2 glasses of water. "The committee wants a follow-up meeting," he said, "and you have been invited to keynote the National Ethics Summit next month." Ariana accepted the glass, her tone calm. "They will expect me to soften my message. I will not." Grant smiled faintly. "No one expects you to." Below them, the street buzzed with protesters and supporters, some chanting her name, others calling her dangerous. Ariana watched them without judgment. "Change always looks like chaos from above," she murmured, "but it is clarity in disguise." Nia stepped out onto the terrace next, tablet in hand, her expression a mix of pride and exhaustion. "The Cole Initiative has raised $40 million in 48 hours, she said. "Half of it came from small donors. People who said your words gave them hope." Ariana smiled gently. "Hope is good, but structure keeps it alive. Let us make sure this is not just a moment, it has to be a model." She turned toward the skyline, the Capitol dome glowing faintly in the distance. "That building used to feel untouchable," she said softly. "Now it feels accountable." Nia hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever think about that day in court, ma'am? About how it all started?" Ariana's gaze hardened slightly. "Every day. It reminds me that dignity can be stolen in seconds, but reclaimed in silence. That is why I never shouted." She paused, then added, "They laughed at my tears, Nia. And now the country is crying with me. Not out of pity, but awakening." Down below, a small crowd began singing softly, an improvised chant of unity echoing through the city streets. It rose faintly up to the terrace, carried by the cold wind. Grant glanced over the edge. "They are not leaving any time soon," he said. "Good," Ariana replied. "That means they are staying for something that matters." Inside, the office televisions displayed breaking news. Asterisk, Congress approves preliminary vote to establish Judicial Accountability Oversight Committee inspired by testimony from CEO Ariana Cole. Asterisk. For a moment, no one spoke. Nia exhaled slowly. "You did it," she whispered. Ariana shook her head. "No, we did not fix the system. We just forced it to look in the mirror." She walked back inside, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The walls of the hallway were lined with photos of Horizon Holdings' milestones, business deals, ribbon cuttings, awards, but none of that mattered anymore. As she passed, she stopped at one empty frame waiting for a new addition. "Leave that one blank," she said to Nia. "It is for what comes next." Later that night, as the city began to quiet, Ariana sat at her desk alone, drafting her next letter, one addressed not to Congress, not to the press, but to every young woman who had ever been silenced in a room of power. Her pen moved slowly but with certainty. "You do not need to raise your voice to change the world," she wrote. "You just need to know when to speak and refuse to sit back down." When she finished, she looked out the window one last time. The Capitol lights shimmered against the darkness. Justice had not been won, but it had woken up. Ariana Cole closed her notebook, exhaled, and whispered to herself. The real verdict was never in the court. It was out here in the people. And for the first time in months, she allowed herself to smile.